Okay, so let's go ahead and start the session. So welcome everyone to the second part of the keywording for the creative industry workshop. This workshop is hosted by Ryerson University and was supported by two wonderful company, the ASM PL powered by DCM and iPay, and it's delivered by the wonderful Clemency Wright, our metadata and keywording consultant from Clemency Wright Consulting. Before we get started, I would like to start with the land acknowledgement. And, so our university is located in Toronto. Toronto is in the dish of one spoon territory. The dish with one spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent indigenous nations and people, European and all newcomers, have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So I have a couple of reminders before we get into the workshop. First of all, the live transcript has been enabled. You can click on the live transcript on your toolbar, and it's going to show up in there. The recording of the first part of this workshop is already posted on our website. If you didn't get the chance to see it, feel free to contact me, and I can share the link with you. For any question and answer, you can use the Q&A panel to post your question. We will try our best to have a couple of breaks in between to start with the Q&A. And we also going to end up with a few minutes at the end of the workshop also to allow some Q&A. Meanwhile, if you have like a general chat, general comment, you can use the chat also. The recording of the session is going also to be shared with the attendees and is going to be available after the session, and we'll send an email to everyone. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Clemency. So Clemency, thank you so much for being here, and over to you.
Well, hello everyone. Thanks for coming back if this is your second session, or welcome if it's your first. As Reem said, today we're going to do an interactive keywording workshop, which I hope you'll find engaging and interesting, and it'll enable you to put into practice some of the theory and lessons that you've been learning through your learning journey with DAM. So I'll start sharing my screen. I just need to check with Reem that I have a screen sharing ability.
Yes, you do. Or let me see. I think now you can.
Okay. Great. So, whoops. Just get this slideshow started for you. Okay. So welcome to session 2 of keywording for the creative industries. So first of all, I just wanted to spend a few moments recapping on last week, because I think this will be helpful in preparing for today's session. And obviously anybody that missed last week will give you a bit of an insight into what we were looking at. So we looked at the key principles of keywording for creative content, which were relevancy, thinking like a customer. So we were thinking about how customers look at imagery, what keywords they use, and what they're most likely to search for when they're looking for your content. And this means you need relevant keywords. We looked at accuracy, and we talked a little bit about the importance of model releases and property releases in terms of keywording people, especially keywords to do with the person's age, ethnicity, gender, religion, anything like that. We talked about inclusion and how we might start to apply demographic keywords. So in line with the releases, we want to think of keywords as a way to help people find content, but also choose words that we find most acceptable for the most number of people. And finally, the key principle we looked at last week was optimization, which is where we can use concepts when they're relevant. So this is really building on keywording images just by what we see in the picture and adding keywords for what we can see, what is shown, and then moving towards optimizing search and access to that content through adding concepts, which is very important for creative industries. So having another look at how we connect users with our content. So remember that the search engine itself can't see the photograph, it just sees the pixels. So they can only read the keywords, the textual information around the image. Therefore, search depends on us adding relevant, accurate and consistent keywords, which match the image and which match the expected language that we think our customers will be using. And we also connect our customers with the content through various methodologies, systems and technologies, which all together can go to enhance the usability. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of those systems and technologies today. So I'm re-showing this slide from last week. Hopefully you can see this okay. And so what we're seeing here is a reminder that the keywords really are the central point in this whole end-to-end process. And if you imagine we're starting with the creator up here at the beginning of the journey, the creator has an idea or a product or some kind of concept that it needs to convey through the image. So obviously it goes through the production process where we may have more elements, including models and locations and various symbolism and imagery concepts. But ultimately, it's this part here highlighted orange, which we really need to think about in terms of keywording so that the content can pass through the journey and become visible to our audience. So again, just to recap on last week, we were talking about the 80-20 ratio, which is something I use to help people learn about how to keyword in their organization or how to keyword for stock photography libraries. And what we find is we start with adding the majority of keywords, around 80% of them, based on the visual attributes. So just as a reminder, this could be exactly what's seen in the photograph or the video, anything that's visible or visual that can be easily identified and non-negotiable. So it's always keywords for things that we all would agree on. And if most people looked at an image and then looked away again, they'd remember similar things. But we also talked about the importance of concepts, because concepts sell content. Most picture buyers do indeed search for concepts when they're looking for imagery. So the 20% is the kind of cream on the top, it's the magic ingredient, and it's the bit that really helps promote the assets that you're managing and keywording higher up in the search engine, giving them better search page results. So just in thinking about that and thinking about how we've been optimizing keywords for search, remember that the purpose of the web content, which could be your images and your text, is to raise awareness, drive traffic and convert browsers into buyers. So in thinking about the search engine as a place to discover content, what most businesses actually need, and especially the creative industries, is to then evoke some kind of an emotional response and promote that engagement that will then ultimately make the customer want to buy from you, buy your product or your service. So the key principles that we looked at last week, which I have just recapped, the final one that I needed to look at with you today is consistency. And we're going to talk about how you might achieve consistency. And hopefully this will help you in the keywording exercise, which we will start shortly, because what you'll find is without some kind of consistent strategy to help you build up the keywording lists, you'll find you're struggling to think about which keywords to add, which keywords not to add, and it can get a little bit confusing and complicated. So we're going to look at some consistency methodologies now. So in this content management process, we typically start with the photograph or the asset, which could be a video or an illustration or a GIF, and it's uploaded into the back-end system. And this system could be your own internal database if you're a photographer, or it could be an image bank in a marketing agency or a creative design company, or it could be a digital asset management system available to end users. So at some point the keywords are applied. Sometimes they could be applied at source and you may be seeing them as the photographer gave them to you, or they might be applied by a picture researcher or a marketing manager, or they could be applied by interns or any keywording agency that you may outsource this work to. So once you've got the content and the keywords married up using unique identifiers or reference codes, you can upload all of this to the site. So I'm saying customer site, but it could be any type of user. It could be commercial, non-commercial, or anything in between. And then when all the content is up onto the site, the search site, it becomes searchable, and it's only searchable through keywords. So keywords being part of the metadata, obviously you've got other metadata fields that the content becomes searchable for, but we're focusing really on keywords at the moment. So what's the objective with making your content searchable? And we're talking about consistency. So to put this into context, the objective with consistency is to eliminate the guesswork by providing the structure and control required for efficient keywording and search. So we're thinking about language as having some kind of a structure, which enables us to control the way keywords are added by the keyworder, and therefore the results that the user gets when they're searching, with the end goal of it being an efficient process for the user. So how would we visualize this as a process, turning unstructured keywords into structured keywords? So we're starting with a collection of words that we might think about, or words that spring to mind as we're looking at an image. And then we have the image within some kind of a system, and we have some metadata fields. And then we're going to try and add in some structure so that the keywords don't just float around and kind of in an inconsistent manner. We want to introduce some kind of a structure within this system so that we can achieve search efficiency. And one way that we can do this is through a controlled vocabulary, which, as you may or may not know, is a way of organizing your keywords using meaningful language that your users will relate to, usually hierarchically, and they also include things like synonyms and plurals. And this controlled vocabulary means that regardless of how a user search, the system will cater for that, and it will make sure that the image results delivered are relevant. And once you've got this in place and you've got some structure there, you're going to find that the search experience and usability is vastly improved. So will you think back to last week, or if you weren't here last week, have a look at this picture, and we're thinking about how would you go about keywording a picture like this? And last week we had a look at some examples from photographers and people attending keywording workshops in the past of what they'd added. So what keywords did you think of, if you can think back to last week and remember what you were thinking about? And what we found was there's actually quite a big variety of keywords that people come up with. And this is one of the biggest problems with unstructured keywords. So as I mentioned, without a structure or a system or a methodology in place, without a controlled vocabulary, your keywords may look a little bit like this. So we might find that they're inconsistent, limitless. So they might just go on and on and on, and people don't know where to stop adding keywords. They can be unpredictable because each person might add different types of words and we can't all agree on the same language. Keywords can be very disorganized if you don't have some kind of a structure. So we need to think about how to get that organization so that there's consistency and organization around the keywords that we're adding. Another big problem with unstructured keywords is ambiguity. This can happen in a search engine where you've got an ambiguous keyword such as orange, which can relate to the color orange or the fruit. And then when a customer searches on orange thinking I want pictures of fruit, they're getting pictures of all sorts of things that are orange but not actually oranges themselves. So ambiguity can also be a problem when you don't have structure, but they can be minimalized or eliminated through having a controlled vocabulary. So unstructured keywords can lead to unreliability in that case, because if you're searching on a search engine and you've got ambiguous results that are a bit unpredictable and inconsistent, you might find that this is an unreliable search platform. And the problem with that for all industries, but particularly creative industries, is there is so much content out there, people don't really have the time to trawl through hundreds or even thousands of images, sometimes millions. So we're looking to introduce the structure and the consistency so that the customer feels this is a really reliable search process and I really trust the information. And finally, there's the issue of subjectivity. So as I mentioned, we don't all speak the same language and we do look at images differently. And I think if you look at the image we've just seen of the child on the train, there'll be different people who see different things, and that's okay. And that is part of the human side of keywording, that we will look at an image and come up with different concepts, but we always need to think like a customer and try and get into the mind of the person who's using the search engine to eliminate too much subjectivity. We don't want to infer or guess or add things that we think are true if we can't really say that this is going to be true for most people looking at the same image. Now, hopefully you can see this slide okay, and you may miss the top couple of terms here. So we've got child, girl, and I can't read it, which is really frustrating, and I can't remember it. So what this shows is how we might start to create structure. So if you remember the image of the child on the train, and last week we looked at a whole variety of keywords that people had thought of, what I've done is I've taken them and started to categorize them in the way you might do using a DAM system with a controlled vocabulary. So the categories that I've come up with for that particular image include people terms up here in the pale grey, subjects and topics here in the darker grey, concepts in this pale green colour, descriptive keywords in yellow, and technical terms in green. And actually even this list isn't the entire list of the terms that people come up with when they look at that one photograph. I think it just goes to show how varied and diverse and plentiful these keywords can be. But by starting to put them into these categories in this way, and I've chosen 5 here, you can start to group them together and look for similarities. And as I was talking about, a controlled vocabulary can do this really well, and it can, once it's in place and you've got the structure there, it will kind of look after itself. So if you have synonyms that are similar to words that mean the same thing or very, very similar, your controlled vocabulary can cater for that, which means your users can search on either one of those terms and still get the same results. So this is one example of how one image could look if you started to structure all those loose keywords, moving from an unstructured keyword set to a more structured looking consistent set of keywords. So we are looking at how we're creating structure. One way you can do that is by having a mental checklist. So if you didn't have a DAM system and you didn't have a controlled vocabulary, you could try to remember what your classification might be, what kind of categories you want to add, keywords for people or concepts or technical terms. A mental checklist can be okay if you're managing very small volumes of data, but of course the problem is it remains in your head, and you need to be able to share that with anyone and everyone who's either adding keywords to the assets or searching for keywords as a user. So it's not the ideal solution. It's not the best solution for creating consistency with your keywording. The next best thing would be documentation, where you take your checklist and you start to document this and illustrate this. You can share this as a learning resource with your teams, with your colleagues, with your customers and users to explain to them what you mean by the different types of keywords. So if you're creating structure and classification and you want people to get the most out of that, you might need to start providing them with some documentation, you know, some infographics, or maybe even training videos to help them with that. We've talked about this, having a hierarchy within a controlled vocabulary is the best thing, really. This caters for all different types of users using different types of keywords, and you'll be able to quickly and easily get a much more efficient search experience for customers if you have a controlled vocabulary in place. Controlled vocabularies can exist outside of DAM systems, but typically you will find a digital asset management has a controlled vocabulary of some sort. Some are more complex than others and can cater for far more nuances. Some are fairly simplistic, but this is just a very quick snapshot of some of the ways we can create structure, even if you don't have something like an enterprise DAM system. So we've done a bit of a recap and we've started thinking about consistency, and we would be starting the workshop next. But first of all, before we do that, I just want to check if anybody has any questions, or if anybody's unsure about what we're doing in the workshop. Let us know now and I'll explain.
So far we don't have any question, but please, you can either, if you have a question, you can post it on the Q&A, or if you have any comment, you can also put it on the chat.
Okay, so I'm going to just navigate to our workshop, and come back to share my screen with you now. Okay, everybody, hopefully you can now see a wonderful photograph and some blank, what I'm calling boards for us to do the keywording exercise. So unless anybody says they can't see that, I will get going with the workshop.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. Okay, so what we're going to do is have a think about some of the categories that we've talked about when keywording in relation to a number of images. And we've actually got quite a large number of images, and we're going to walk through one by one. And what I'd like is for people to actually type in their keyword suggestions as they see the image into the chat box. And Haiying is going to kindly help me with this exercise by creating little keyword sticky notes, and I'll be able to talk through the keywording process with you in real time. So hopefully this will be useful and it'll get you thinking about the sort of keywords that you might be adding to actually keyword some of these assets for creative projects. So I'm not doing the keywording. This is up to everybody else on the call. So if Haiying and Reem want to get things started and start adding a few keywords, we'll get things underway. So if you double click, Haiying, on the screen, is it not giving you one? So if you click to the, that's it. And you can actually pull it out so it's a little bit bigger, I think.
We have some wonderful, suggestion. Keep it
Great.
going on the chat. Yes, we keep it going on the chat.
So as you
Maybe
can see,
you can increase the font also, the font size.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. So I'm going to start adding the keywords one by one. And we'll talk through these. We're going to spend roughly 5 minutes per image. So add as many keywords in as you can. Don't hold back. So I've got some very specific keywords, which is always really helpful for customers looking for this style of architecture. And I've also got a term here, which I'm not sure what this refers to. So if you could let me know, that would be helpful.
The CBO is the Central Business District. CBD is the Central Business District.
Thank you. Okay. And by empty trees, I'm not too sure what that means, if that's a term I'm not familiar with.
Empty streets.
Ah, streets. Okay. So okay, well, I'm hoping that some more will come through, but I'll just talk about a few of these now as they're up there. So when we're breaking down an image like this, we kind of need to work through this mental checklist, but create some sort of a structure. So a structure for this one might be, just want to make that a little bit bigger. For whether we've got people or not in the image, whoops, sorry. It might mean that we want to actually, oh, I lose it when I do it. I might need Haing to do that for me. I need to add in a keyword nobody here, so I might need a little sticky note to do that. So a good place to start is whether you do or don't have people. If you think back to last week and we were talking about model releases, and just do this. We were talking about model releases last week, and we may have people who could be identified by their age or their gender, which is really helpful for picture researchers. And in this image, we don't have anybody in the image. So what I would prefer you to do is add the keyword nobody, and some picture libraries use the keyword no people, but for most stock photo libraries it would be nobody that we use for this particular type of image. This is in the way, which is a little bit frustrating. Okay, so technical keywords can include things like this keyword here, which is aerial shot. I think this probably is an aerial shot in that it was taken probably using a drone, but it could be just, you know, from a high building across the street. But either way, we do want to try and add technical keywords for angles like this. So we might even add something like elevated view here as well. Okay, so thinking about the setting and location, I don't actually know which city this is. I would need to know, and I would need to find that information out from either the photographer or the picture library that I was working for. So which city is this needs to be added into the specific locations field. If you're working with a controlled vocabulary, you probably would only need to add the city. But as we may or may not be, in lots of organizations, there might not be a controlled vocabulary. You'd need to add the name of the city, the name of the country, and the continent, which I assume is Asia. But yes, we'd need to have two keywords in here for the specific
Clemency,
city.
I think we lost you for a second.
When did you lose me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, what point was I at, Reem?
You was talking about the location of the picture.
Okay, so yeah, we need the specific name of the city and the country to be added in as well. So I'm not sure of the source for this image, but what is the city? Can you tell me? Have you lost me?
No, we're here, but we didn't receive any answer yet.
Oh, okay. Right.
Is it Shanghai? Maybe.
Okay, so, well, I don't know what it is, so I can't guess, and I can't kind of use my subjective view to tell me without knowing for sure. We would, especially for a photo library, we would want to know exactly where this is, and those would be the keywords that we add to the setting and location field here. So in addition to that, we've got some other useful keywords, the city and urban, because remember, people might want to search for urban scenes or architectural photography in a certain region. So without adding those as specific keywords, the image wouldn't come up. So what we might do is add a very standard keyword, generic keyword, architecture, as well. So we've got traditional architecture and architecture. Temple as a building style. If you remember, I was talking about whether you do or don't have a hierarchy. If you don't, you might also want to add something like religious architecture, because people may want to search specifically for temples, but they might also just want all religious buildings. So that's a really useful way of keywording if you don't have a controlled vocabulary. And I'm just going to add in a couple more that I think might be useful for this particular image. Illuminated, as you know, the lights are illuminating the building. And I think we've got traditional architecture here. If this was in Shanghai, then obviously we'd be able to add more, because we could add Shanghai, China, Asia, and we could also add, you know, East Asia. We could also, the Far East, we could add Chinese architecture and traditionally Chinese as well. Empty streets, triangles. I think triangles refers to the shape of the building. I think in stock libraries, they often, well, I'm not sure if you'd agree, but they often call them flying eaves to describe this kind of building. Okay, so there's a few more important keywords to add when thinking about locations. We've got travel, travel destinations. They're different things because you may travel to an area of the world that is not what we would call a destination. So it could be, you know, part of the world that's in wartime, or part of the world that's very extreme. The terrain is very extreme, and you wouldn't actually call it a travel destination as such. So they're two different things that we add depending on the image and the specific location. So those can go there. If we knew the actual name of the building and we knew what it was, we might find that this is a landmark of some kind. And I'm going to assume it is, in that it's probably recognizable to people who've been to this city, or certainly, you know, people who know this specific location. So that's another keyword that's really useful for travel, because people will search for landmarks in a certain area, even if they don't know the specific name of that landmark. Okay, is there anything else that we could add in terms of concepts or topics? I think that might be it. Depending on the library as well, you might start to think about a keyword which is old and new, or contrasts. And the reason I say that is because we've got these kind of new high-rise skyscrapers here to the left, and then we've got the more traditional architectural building here. So if you were working on an architectural collection, for example, you might actually add something like contrasts or old and new. And for buildings, we often add the keyword building, exterior or interior. Okay, So that was our first image, which took roughly 5 minutes. So we're going to work through some more images now, and they'll all be quite different. But remember that we're thinking about how to structure the keywords. So we're thinking about where is the photograph taken, if we know, who's in the photograph, if anyone is, what's happening, what can you see, and also try to think as we go through of the hierarchy. So the example being here where we have architecture, we've got traditional architecture and religious architecture, and we've also got temples. So there's a hierarchy forming quite naturally there. So next photographs, as we look through them, try and think about the other related keywords and hierarchical terms, and maybe even synonyms that you would want to be adding to help people find that particular image. So we'll move back now to the collection of photographs and come on to the second photograph now. So I just want to. Okay, so hopefully this is working okay for Hying. I'm going to give you a bit more space here to start adding some new keywords for this photograph. So we can see people. So you'll want to think about any keywords that you can add for the people. The setting, where are they? Anything about the people? It's quite an interesting image, actually. What would you use to describe their style, their clothing, anything about the image that stands out to you? So I'll make a start moving these across, and then we'll talk through them as we go.
So Clemency, there is a comment about this photograph from Christy. This photo is from our collection, a painted glass slide from early 1900.
Early 1900 slide. Okay, so it looks like it's been colorized then. It would have had this wonderful color kind of painted in afterwards, I guess. Okay, so this is a historic photograph or a slide from that specific time period, which would make it 20th century, early 20th century. So we can use those as keywords as well. So we've got something to describe the people, something about the technical aspect of the image itself, another keyword to describe the people. This is very, very specific. So I think this will be referring to the name of the place, the Central Experimental Farm. You have garden, clothing again, clothing keyword, and it's in Ottawa, which is in Canada. So there's a hierarchy forming there. And if I were to move the specific name of the farm with its city and its country, we've got a nice hierarchy forming there. Magic lantern slide, I don't know what that refers to, whether it's a reference to the layout of the garden or something like that. I don't know. You might need to let me know if you can what that refers to. So here's another hierarchy here. We've got the season keyword and spring.
So Clemency, the magic lantern slide is the type of slide it is painted on.
Ah, okay. So this is the technical term for the slide, which would have been the glass slide, I guess. History, historical, they're related. And then we've got more keywords for the people. Okay, so in terms of these people, I noticed that we've got a suggestion of white people. So there's different ways that we can say that. And in thinking about demographic keywords that we looked at in last week's session, which you can catch on the recording, we were talking about the sort of terminology that we use to describe people, the color of people's skin. And often the keyword that we tend to use in the industry is Caucasian, which would be okay to add here as well. And often white people or white person is synonymized with Caucasian. So that would be another example of a control vocabulary coping with the different ways that people use terminology. So you might find you get, you know, if you're working without a control vocabulary, you might add both Caucasian and white people, or you may have the opportunity to synonymize them as well. So I'm going to add it in here as a little reminder. So in terms of the people, we've got general keyword adult and children. Yeah, I was going to say the next ones would either be something about the gender, which could be male and female. We could also, if we know they're adults, we can legitimately say men and women, because people will search for things in different ways. You might have people that are just looking for Victorian males or children in the Victorian times, or you might have people searching for women in formal wear. So however you think a customer might search or a user might search to find an image like this, you need to think about how a Boolean search engine works to parse together those individual types of keywords. So we've covered adult, male, female. So I'd also encourage men, women. Where this can get complicated now is with all the various ways that people wish to identify themselves. So I think with this historic type of work, it's often okay and acceptable to add men and women, but obviously working with stock photography now is not as straightforward as that, and we need to look at model release to see how that person wishes to identify their, you know, what their pronouns would be. I'm going to add film in here. Family vacation. Now, if this is coming from knowledge of the photograph and you know when it was taken and by who, if we know that that's what's happening here, then that's okay to add. If we don't know that and we're kind of making an assumption that they're on holiday or it's a vacation, then we probably wouldn't add that normally, because it could be too subjective or, you know, interpretive. But I will put it here for now. Clothing objects, black and white. So it's like a colorized black and white image, isn't it? The visitors can go with people. So because we've got people in this photograph, you can already see there are lots more keywords for people than the one of the temple that we looked at first. I'm just trying to think of any immediate things that we need to add around the location and setting. So we've got flowers, tulips, garden. Did we have? Yeah, I'm going to put tulips with flowers and garden. Have we got? We've got vintage, but I mean, this is Victorian, so I'd probably add that. Did we say it was the early 1900s?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so these historic terms are very useful because people might search for the style, the period, Victorian period, Georgian, Edwardian, but equally they might search by century. And if you're managing a DAM system, you might find with historic content like this that you actually have separate metadata fields for 20th century, 19th century, 18th century imagery. So that's really useful to add as a keyword, and urban park is more of a setting keyword. So that's a really interesting image. I've been busy looking at your suggestions to have too much time to think for myself, but I know we definitely want keywords around history. So history, the past, maybe as a concept could work quite well. And I think something around the coloration of the image as well, if whatever the term for that would be. I'd probably do some research. Are there synonyms around this technique of painting the glass slide? Often, you know, depending on the collection, you do need to do a bit of research just to get the technical terms correct. Okay, I think probably time to move on to the next image. they're going to go all out of order now. I'll bring up the next image, but are there any questions about the process? Is anybody struggling with the process at all, or just wants to kind of me to clarify anything at this point, or should we carry on?
No questions so far.
Okay, great. So here's another people image, people-based image. So we'll probably find we get more keywords for people on this one as well. In fact, there's not much else going on, but you can probably just see from the crop here that this person is on a stage. I'm saying this person on a stage. We can see the microphone and the curtains and the lighting, what have you. So let's have a go at this picture and see what we come up with. How many keywords we can find that could be relevant for somebody who's looking for this picture. So just as a reminder, you want to think about what are the sort of things you would search for and get this picture back and think, yeah, that's a really good result for the query that I typed in. So what were the other keywords that go with people if we would say this person is adult? We can't say that they're young adult or mid-adult, but we can certainly say adult. And what else is there you could say about the person's composition? So how much of the person can we see? What angle is the person photographed at? And things like that really help with this kind of image. There's a bit of a clue in the title of this image. If you look to the top of the image and the way and the name that I've given the image, there's a keyword that we would always add to this type of photograph of people, because it's a very popular request for people looking for photographs of people to search by this keyword. I'll wait for it to pop up. Yep, so standing. Got some emotion coming through here. We've got happy, confidence, casual, comfortable. So spotlight, portrait. Brilliant. So when we were talking about people on the previous session, we were saying how it's useful to add keywords for number of people. So we can have number of people, amount in view, how we can, that we can see they're not quite, they're not waist up and they're not full length. So there's not really a decent keyword for that. But something about this person's style, I would say. We had casual. Yeah, I would maybe say something about the hairstyle. I'm not sure really, without blowing this image up, if you would call this maybe a quiff or like a teddy boy hairstyle. But for now, I'll just add hairstyle in as a descriptive keyword there. Front view is more technical, one person, Caucasian. So just a note about this suggestion, formal, casual attire. It's always the goal with keywording to think of phrasing things in a way that you think other customers will search. And that means kind of trying to think of a term that's more in line with, let's say, the stock photography industry, because with imagery, there's so many different ways of saying things that we want to try and eliminate too much variety. So I'd probably go with something more generic than that and just say what the person is wearing rather than try and describe the style. So we have that through blazer, which could be synonymous with jacket. So you could add jacket or blazer and camouflage and trousers. So in that way, if someone's searching for specific clothing, they'll get back the picture. My only concern with this keyword formal casual attire is it could mean different things to different people. It's quite an ambiguous word, and also it's a compound term, and where possible we try not to use too many compound keywords where you've got more than one word making up the keyword itself. Another example is camouflage print, but that's actually okay, I think, because camouflage is ambiguous. It could refer to the animal world or even plant world. So camouflage print is obviously, an interpretation of that. So that one probably does work okay. Comedian, we've got performer as well, stand-up performer and singer, short hair. This is definitely an ambiguous word, because here in the UK, this means underwear. So this can go here for now, but what I would be doing if I was keywording for a client would be to add the UK English as well, so that they've got both options. Their customers can search by US or UK English. Okay, so just have a quick look. We've got my mental checklist for this image would be portrait, one person, man, which we didn't have, an adult. So these are the people keywords that I would add. I would also add, thinking about the portrait element. Oops, I'm sorry. Looking at camera. And then something about their emotion. That's generally the next thing I go to. So smiling, happy, I often write as happiness because it's more conceptual. And it's also synonymized with happy in most search engines, so that it would work whether you typed in happy or happiness. Confidence is a good concept for that particular stance. Yeah, I was after a keyword for this as well, and I wasn't sure where to go with that. So I'm going to add this keyword queer here.
So Clemency, the person who actually provided this image, mentioned that this image presents a very gender fluid masculine for that person. So hopefully that would.
Yeah, no, that's good. So if we know that this person's like non-binary or wants to identify in a certain way, just to reiterate, we would add that as a keyword if it was, something that person wanted to be identified as. And if we didn't have that information, we wouldn't guess. We would just add very generic keywords, one person, adult. We wouldn't even go into the gender aspect at all. But I think that's okay, if we've been given that information, to add that in. I mean, we've clearly got more keywords for people anyway, because it's just focused on one person. When we've got keywords about what the person is, so we've got performance and singer and comedian, we can also think about concepts that go with that. So you can have like performance as a concept, and a keyword that we use, I said try not to use compound terms, but a keyword we use is arts, culture and entertainment. And that's a good keyword for the image industry in general, because it relates to all sorts of arts, culture and entertainment venues and activities. So you can add that generically to anything to do with the arts, performing arts or visual arts or movies or anything like that, art galleries and museums. So we've got, in terms of setting, fewer keywords. That's mainly because there isn't much going on in the image itself, but I think it's fair to say we've got a stage, concert, club. Synonyms to this could be nightclub, and maybe we've got the microphone, maybe the curtains is relevant there, spotlit. I think that pretty much covers it. So yeah, I think definitely it's not surprising that we've got the majority of keywords around the person in that particular image. Okay, I'm going to move through quickly to the next one. Is anybody finding, oh, this is too large. Is anybody finding the categorization difficult? Are people kind of quite happy thinking about this in terms of those different categories that we've got on the screen here, or is that actually quite distracting?
So far, no comment.
Okay. So with the other image we had with nobody in it, who's the first person to remember what the keyword would be? Because you can't just not let the customer know there is no person in this photograph. So we need to add the keyword for that first of all, really. Hi-Ying, you don't have much space for your sticky notes on this one. Great. So objects mainly for this image. So here's another hierarchy. We've got food, which is great because if you just want pictures of food, you can have a photograph like this come back and be really pleased. But again, if you want to be really specific about the type of food, you need to add that as a keyword as well. So that's a very good methodology to follow. Healthy eating is more of a concept term, so that can go down here. Nutrition, yeah, I'd say topic as well. Spiral is ambiguous. I think we probably for this one mean, I think is it fusilli pasta? That's the name of the pasta. So we'll put that there. Spiral or spiral pasta could be a synonym of that. I wouldn't name the keyword spiral because it's ambiguous, and when someone's keywording, they need to know what they're adding. When they add a keyword, they need to know what that's supposed to be meaning for a customer. So I'd always rename to something more specific and try to avoid anything ambiguous as a keyword. We've got some other ingredients here as well. And that was the keyword I was looking for to kick things off, nobody. My mental checklist is always people. So who, where, what, and maybe when. So who, if you don't have people in the image, means that you need to start with this keyword for people, for nobody. Got dish, fusilli is that one, we have that. Homemade, we'll have here, and so portraits don't, I
Clemency,
think.
we have a question here.
Hello.
Yes, Clemency, we have a quick question, which I think is really interesting. So the last week, the word clean space thing came up. Is this a general rule of thumb to add this keyword for design or layout teams?
Clean space, yeah, like copy space.
Yes.
Yes, I would do that. So as a technical keyword for this image, because there's plenty of blank space here that's pale and you could easily add copy over the top of this image, I would add that keyword copy space as a technical keyword. So we've got a couple of terms I'm not too sure about. So restaurant is tricky because if you have lots of images of food, including like the industry and restaurants and, you know, cuisine based food in your library, you probably wouldn't want to add this keyword for the reason that it doesn't show a restaurant clearly. So it's just a reminder to think about what the image is actually showing and focus on the primary visual elements, so that you avoid people searching on restaurants and getting pictures of food back, because that could be a bit of a weak result if they did that. Vegetarian, I'm going to put with the kind of type of food here. Greens, again, that's another ambiguous one. I mentioned orange. Green
So,
is another
Clemency,
one.
we have a follow-up question about the clean space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have the question about what about the white background for any post work?
Yeah, so for this particular studio shot, I would be adding plain background as one keyword, and then the color of the background if it's relevant. So it's actually off-white, but I would say white for argument's sake. So these two keywords can go with copy space as a technical keyword methodology. So what that means is it allows people to search, a designer to search for images of food or specifically pasta or fusilli pasta with copy space. And if they also want that black background to be plain rather than patterned, and they want the plain background to be white, this means that these three keywords will enable quite a nuanced, complex search to take place. So again, I would leave this off because I think kitchen and restaurant don't depict this image very well. Well lit. Now, a photographer wouldn't be able to help me with this, but it does look like it could have been taken with a flash, which is what this might refer to. From a technical point of view, I wouldn't be able to say it's using certain lighting or anything like that just from looking, but I wouldn't say it, compared with the person on the stage just now where it was very dark, I thought that was a good suggestion. This well lit keyword, I'm not too sure about. I think it's perhaps not particularly helpful. And I think greens, in terms of the pea shoots, the peas, I think they are sprouts or pea leaves, I think we'd leave that one off as well, because green is not the it's not the predominant color. And when people are looking for color, they're looking for something very obvious and clear. And this one, I would say, is just, combination of certain colors on the plate. It's not particularly helpful to add a keyword for that. And portrait shot, I think I was about to say, if we're referring to, a portrait as opposed to a landscape, we'd have this as a technical keyword. Not too sure about these ones here. And focus shot, often with focal points, we will add differential focus or selective focus. We can even be more detailed and say focus on foreground or focus on background. But for this particular shot, I wouldn't say the focal point is anything significant. So that's probably as far as I would go with that one. So just thinking with my keywording head on, what would be, other things that we would have to consider adding. We've got the who, what, where, when, why, if you like. So there's nobody in the picture. It's a plate of food, it's pasta, it's a certain type of pasta, and it's got these green pea shoots or leaves on there as well. We might have other ways of saying that. We might actually have a keyword salad to go with that. Then we need to think about what sort of the ways customers search, what sort of things would they type in to find this image? Well, they might type in meal or lunch, or depending on what you call it. We call it lunch at midday and dinner in the evening. Food we had as a general one. And then I suggested that healthy eating is what we normally call this in the industry. Is a good topic to add to this kind of image. We've got nutrition, and we could, along with that, yes, I was going to say add vegetarian, quick meals. It's more colloquial. It's not a kind of accepted term in the industry, but I know exactly what you mean by that. We do have keywords for things like convenience food and fast food, which are, as you would expect, things like, burgers and things from fast food outlets. But this one not generally used, but although I do know what you mean. Homemade is a really useful keyword, and food photography as a topic, you wouldn't necessarily need to add that because you've already got food and the search engine will know it's a photograph. So the two things would pass together and you wouldn't necessarily need to add that one. But that's good. So we've looked at a couple of images now without people, a couple of images with people, and we'll see what's next on the list. And I'm just checking my time. And I knew this would happen because often this process does take a lot longer than we want it to, when we've got questions as well at the end and we want to save time for questions. So I think I'm just looking at the variety that we have here. We might move on to this image here. We'll try and get a couple more in. So sorry about changing the order, Hying. I hope this doesn't mess things up for you, but I want to try and get the dog in as well. So we've got a couple of different types of images and different variety. So we'll spend 5 minutes on this one now. So who's in the photograph? What are they doing? What are the different keywords you need to describe this person in terms of her age or their age and gender? What are they doing? Can you describe the emotion? Can you describe the actual activity that this person is doing? What else is there in the picture that you can see that's significant? Where are they? Is it really noticeable? Do you think it's really recognizable where this child is? And why are they doing it? Do you think there's a story behind this? Do you think there's some kind of message being conveyed by all of these elements? So toddler is good because it's a more specific way of describing this age group of child, which is really helpful for picture buyers. So I think it is interesting, but there's already a lot more conceptual keywords coming up, things that I would call concepts like story time, bedtime, being silly, that sense of humor coming through. So obviously we've got many more concepts on here than we would on an image of a building or a plate of pasta, which stands to reason. Don't forget the we have got that. We could have female as well if we wanted to. So describing the person. And bedroom, yeah, I'd say it is a bedroom. And what I would say, and I think this was why I was talking about where is she, is to decide how important that is as an actual search term. So if you're classifying the image, you'll be tempted, and there's a tendency to add a keyword for everything that we know. But remember that if a customer searches for bedroom, and that's the only keyword they type in, they get a picture of this girl back, then the bedroom keyword seems to have less significance. So it might be worth not adding location unless you feel it really is relevant as a search term. That is very, very specific as well. The red bow, I'm going to put that to the side. But yeah, I would agree with the hair color and the concepts are really helpful. Yeah, home is a better keyword actually. It's a home setting as opposed to a school setting. So I would actually go as far as to say she's sat in bed. I think that's what I'm getting from this. I don't know if you'd agree, but I'd rather have this come up as a keyword search for a child in the bed or a girl sitting on the bed than I would picture of bed covers or a white sheet. I think these two are very, very specific, and bed is more contextual. A child in bed with a bedtime story, that seems to make more sense to me. Yeah, sitting is a useful keyword. I think last week we touched on activity keywords for things like sitting, standing, walking, because if you think about all the photographs of people and children that you could have in a collection, you could have many, many thousands. You'll have users that are looking specifically for images of them doing certain activities. So wherever possible, you can differentiate the image using those specific keywords. So a kind of keyword that I would use in lieu of action shot might be candid. So a candid portrait means, you know, it's a portrait of a person who's not really posing, you know, not looking at the camera, just doing their own thing. And that's a really useful keyword for this kind of lifestyle image. So on that note, one of the main concepts for an image like this would be lifestyle. We can also have keywords for real people.
Clemency, we do have another question. And Justin, thank you so much for the question. I was actually have the same question.
Yeah.
In regard to technical, is it standard to highlight the lighting component, like natural light, ambition, etc., versus studio or full flash?
Yeah, I think actually going back to the previous image, we could have had studio on there, studio shot. And for this one, I would probably have natural light, because although you don't add it by default, you can see on the wall here the sunlight coming through. It does, and it really catches her hair because she's slightly backlit or lit from the side. So I think natural light would be a really nice keyword here. I would just say don't add it to everything that is actually, you know, technically natural light. Just where you feel there's a kind of suggestion and enough of a suggestion to give it, you know, to warrant that keyword would be useful. So yeah, studio lighting, studio shot, natural light. We also have really specific keywords for things like lens flare or bokeh lighting and things like that, which are more technical, but I haven't seen any examples of that in the exercise so far today. So lifestyle. So then for these images of people, I just added a couple of extra ones there. Authenticity, real people. We can, for children, oops, I'm trying to move this up. So for children, we can also add a concept childhood. And we have, oh, there was another keyword I was thinking of just then. We can have keywords around her mood, playfulness. Childhood. There was another one that I can't think of now, another concept around childhood that I'd want to add to this image. Probably come back to that later as it comes to me. Okay, so there's, as you can see, lots of conceptual images and images around the person's mood and the playful tone of the image, the fact that she's pulling a funny face, having fun. That's probably the keyword I was thinking of. We've got things like innocence, which we often apply to children as well, with it, especially with the shot being so candid and natural looking. So the fewer keywords really on the setting, and that stands to reason because the focus is on this child and really the setting is incidental. One thing I would add when children are having bedtime stories read as well is often a routine, as in, you know, the bedtime routine. That could be quite a nice picture search for people to carry out. The bedtime routine could be anything from, you know, having stories read or having the hair brushed or having a bath, those kinds of things. So routine can be a very broad search where people get all of those results in one go. Or the person might think, well, no, I specifically want bedtime stories, which we've added here. So again, we're broadening access to the different ways that people search for content. Probably got time for a couple more, which is quite good. I was going to look at the dog. So I just want to check as well while I set this one up. Are there any other questions or anything, Reem or Haing, that you want to ask me about or get clarification on?
I think it's a very interesting exercise, and I can see that by knowing the background or the story behind the picture, you actually can add other kind of keywords. So I think this is really helpful.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, really. It's knowing the background. It's knowing, we talked about this in session 1. What's the platform? You know, who are you keywording this content for? What type of collection is it? And who are the users? Because when you know all that information, you can keyword with them in mind. And all we're doing now really is looking at a photograph and adding some keywords. But if I was doing this for a specific client or an organization, I would be bringing in all my knowledge about the context of that image, and we'll probably do one from the university in a moment. That adds another layer of context to the keywording process. So I think the more you know about the process in terms of who you're keywording for and for what platform and why, you can start to add more user-focused keywords that will work best, on that particular platform. So we've got the home setting for this one, and then we've got the specific keywords. There should be quite a lot of hierarchy here. So we've got the type of dog. Well, we may have the type of dog. What's the breed of dog if we know that? We've got the fact that the dog is a pet as opposed to a wild dog, and a description of the dog, and a description of what the dog is doing, which I would still only add, not add this as a compound term. I would split this up into sitting and dog. The issue, if I can just make the point now, the issue of having a compound term like this is a lot of people when keywording won't know that you have that in your thesaurus. So some people will type in sitting and then dog, and some people just type dog and they won't think to add sitting. But some people, if they think this keyword exists, will add it. The problem is you'll get inconsistency because it's not controlled enough. It would be like having, shaking dog or wagging dog wagging tail as keywords. It could get too limitless, as I mentioned in the unstructured keywording slide. We're using control to break the keywords down as far as possible into single terms, and then the search engine will pass those together in a Boolean search. So what we'll do is have sitting and dog. This keyword here and this keyword here will give you sitting dog pictures. So that's something about the location. We've got sitting, we've had that one. So sitting on the couch. So this is a good example of the US, UK English thing. We would add sofa. US or, in Canada, you may add couch. Animal is the top of the hierarchy. So we've got the animal, the dog, the type of dog with it being pet. We can also say a synonym for that might be domesticated. It's just another way of saying it. The specific breed and what the dog is wearing around its neck. So this is a descriptive term for the dog, which again, cute is the descriptive term here and here. So with animals, we actually do add a keyword, but we don't use portrait, we use animal portrait just to kind of distinguish between the two. If people want portraits of animals or they're looking for pictures of animals, you can create a keyword animal portrait and then make those terms synonymous to that. So we've got a full length dog. I distinguish that from headshot or, a kind of waist up, for example. You may have waist up of a dog, just, or, a dog's paws, that certain body parts, the dog's nose or the dog's eyes. So this is helpful for narrowing down. Again, you can't probably imagine a library that's full of pictures of animals that you'd need to be that specific, but I have actually just had an inquiry from a customer whose picture library focuses on pictures of dogs' body language. So we're going to be keywording very specifically the different body parts of the dog and what that means in terms of what they're trying to communicate. So we do need to be specific at times about these things.
Clemency, we have another question for you for this particular picture. Isn't animal portrait a compound term?
Yes, so we do have some compound terms. In fact, leather sofa is one that we often use. This is the most tricky aspect of teaching keywording. We try and avoid compound terms because it leads to inconsistency, but where you were to split the two terms up or the three words up, if it led to even more confusion, then we will keep it as a compound term. So animal portrait, if you split it up, you'd have animal and portrait as two separate keywords, and portrait is ambiguous with portraits of people. This is why we're happy to keep it as the compound term. Again, with leather and sofa, you might have pictures of people on a sofa with a leather coat, but we actually want to help people find leather sofas because it's quite a popular keyword. It's a bit like denim jacket or blue sky. These are other types of compound terms that can work really well in a thesaurus. It's the most tricky part to teach because you've got to kind of think about how the words would behave in the search engine if you were to split them up versus if you were to add them together. But I think those are probably the best examples. Denim jacket, leather, sofa, animal portrait, that's another example. I hope that helps explain a little bit. It is tricky to kind of think about it in those terms. Another example might be something like, do you know grandfather clocks? I'm sure you do have them where you are. So grandfather clock would need to be a compound term because the word grandfather means something completely different out of the context of grandfather clock. You'd have customers searching for grandfather clocks using those two words separately, and they'd probably get back pictures of granddads with their grandchildren and a clock on the wall in the background. That's where we would start to put compound terms together. Is that okay?
Yeah, we have a comment in terms of shedding. A leather sofa is best, but this dog looks like it might not shed. And yes, your comment, your answer was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, that's right. We because we have not long had a puppy, this was one of the things I was thinking, oh, you know, will our breed of dog shed its hair? It's a border collie, and some of them do and some of them don't, but ours is a short haired border collie, so he doesn't seem to shed his hair. But yeah, I think it's fair to describe the dog's expression. I think he does look like a classic pet. And some of the keywords we add to dogs to help kind of distinguish the type or the character, if you like, can include things like loyalty or obedience. He looks quite well behaved, or he or she looks quite well behaved. Maybe something like curious. It's a little bit pensive. So these are just examples just to get you thinking about how you might differentiate and add a bit more nuance to your keyword, not just picture of a dog on a sofa, but is there anything about the dog that you would you know, that you would say describes that dog? And oh, sorry, I'm trying to grab these. I don't know if I can grab them. I thought I could grab them all together. I'll put them in here. And that one. Okay, I think the dog's pretty much done, and we are going to run out of time. So, Haiying or Reem, do you want to pick one last picture for us to look at? We've got the, can you see them okay? They're quite small.
I would like to pick something from my area, the press. Yeah. And this is really challenging. I'm looking forward to see what kind of keywords you can come up with.
Which one are we doing, Reem?
There's the close-up printer. Yeah, printers, close-up.
Printers. So I did ask my husband about this because he is a graphic designer. And I said, oh, so what are they then? Are they just printers? And he said, well, they might be CMYK printers. I don't know from looking. So as a keyword, my job is to find out as much information as I can about the picture before I start adding keywords, because I've got to think about my users. So yes. I'm not going to suggest anything. I'm going to wait to see what comes up for the type of printers that these are, and then we'll start looking at keywords.
I can help you with that, since this is my area of expertise. So this is a Flexo press, and yes, it's a CMYK printer. So, and it's usually also there's a technical term that we, and Haiying, I believe, this can help you also with the technical terms. So this is narrow press, because the press size is also small, usually used for printing labels.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of terminology around the specific machine. And as I've always said, you know, throughout the course, that we need to be as accurate as possible. There's no benefit guessing and just saying, oh, well, it's just a printer. You know, you need to be as detailed as possible to get the most out of the search experience. So we've got some generic terms: machinery, actually I'll put that here, industrial, and then more specific terms.
It's funny, we have some of the attendees in this workshop coming from the Graphics Communication Management School of Graphics Communication Management, and they are providing their technical terms. So
brilliant. So they're technical terms about the object, but not the image, which is why I'm putting them here, because I'm talking about the object, the machine itself, the printer itself. So where we say technical terms, that usually relates to the photograph. Just to clarify that. So these ones are all going in here for objects that we can see in the image. The activity is printing. So this is a technical term about the picture, nobody. And I've actually titled the picture close up. So that could be another technical term. Setting. Test chart. White sheet, that's fairly ambiguous as well. Are we talking about the paper, the plain paper that goes into the machine? I would avoid this one simply because without seeing any photographs, if you go to a blank search box and type in white sheet, what would you expect to come back? And in my experience, not being, you know, working for specifically for this type of content, I'd say white sheet is more related to, you know, bedding. So I'm not sure about this term here, but we certainly have got paper, and then we've got the kind of keywords to describe what we're seeing on the paper.
So we have a question for you. Wouldn't CMYK be a technical term? How come it's in the people object category?
Why have I put it here? I've just put it here because I'm talking about objects. So CMYK being what we're seeing printed on the paper. So this is all to do with the actual object of the machine itself, the printer itself.
Okay, and I have another question for you. When keywording in multiple languages, should they be translation or should they be different based on expressions?
If you're in an enterprise organization, they might have the capabilities to translate terminology in their controlled vocabulary. So what you would have is a keyword for printer in English, and then the translated term for French and Italian and German, for example. When keywording for most of my clients, I only really need to do UK English. I might make US English a synonym. So where I'm adding sofa to pictures of sofas, I would make couch a synonym to that. It really depends on the client, and in industry, you know, what the client has in terms of a digital asset management system as to whether you can actually translate within that or not. If it doesn't support it, then you'd need to then discuss with your client if they need translations. They might need to be added in manually. Getty Images, where I worked for a number of years, they did this. So every keyword that we created for the thesaurus, they would have European translators creating the equivalent in their European languages, and they would then become linked to the keywords that we made in English. So they got around it in a sort of fairly manual way there. But I know some clients do employ Google Translate and other translating online tools to do that sort of work. It just depends on whether your users are going to need to search in lots of different languages as to how you tackle that and whether it's actually necessary or not.
We have another question for you. Could you explain why nobody is a technical term here?
So technical just means information about the photograph. So that's things like whether it's color, black and white, whether there's people or nobody, whether it's landscape or portrait. So it's it just means it's a technical aspect about the image. I usually put it here in this exercise, because if we put it in people, it kind of contradicts the fact that there is no person in the photograph. So yeah, it just purely refers to the aspect of the image, like the color ratio, the aspect ratio, the color, the fact that it's a photograph. If we were completing the technical fields, we would have things like the medium, whether it's color, black and white, and orientation. And this goes for all the previous examples. Oops. I really wish I could grab them all in one go, but yeah, so nobody goes with these terms because it just describes the image from a technical aspect. Okay, here we've got a few keywords that are kind of related around the topic, the general topic of industry. So if you've got hierarchy, you might say industry is at the top, and then you might have commercial, as in commercial industry, and then you've got graphic arts and also graphic communications. You might have other keywords you want to add here, like graphic design, or the printing industry. I think we might have had that somewhere else, but yeah, I would probably add printing industry along with these ones as well. I left basement off here, Reem, just because I felt that even if we know it's in the basement, and I have talked about knowing information that we know can be applied, you know, to enhance visibility. Again, as with the girl in the bedroom, the basement aspect is not very visible, so I would actually avoid adding that as a search term because it could be a bit misleading.
Yeah, we have two comments for you, Clemency. One is about the CMYK. So a CMYK can also be a technical term if we describe the actual image, especially if we look at it from as a color space. So in the graphics art, we use the CMYK to express that this is a printing using a CMYK color space, which is dedicated also for printing, as opposed to RGB images, which is used red, green, blue, that we usually use to display images in on the monitors. So would you agree on this statement?
Yes, I would agree that this is what the object is showing, the CMYK colorways on the paper. Was the comment referring to the image itself being color, as in this keyword here?
Because we use the color space as a technical term in the graphics art, so we consider that as a technical term.
Color space?
Yes.
Where's that keyword? Did somebody suggest it? Or?
Well, it's not written, it's in the comments.
Oh, it's in the oh, okay. Well, I can't see the comments. So if that's a keyword, you can just add it as a keyword to the objects field here.
Okay.
It sounds like it's to do with the CMYK printing process. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. It would just be, again, we were thinking about like how you would think of these as hierarchical keywords. You'd probably have in your hierarchy something like color, CMYK, and color space in that order. It's kind of a natural hierarchy to help describe the terminology for your industry.
Perfect. We do have another question. When it comes to client, the external and internal department, creating images with the lack of any description or keywords, what is the safest course of action? If we were to create a document, is it best to have an umbrella keyword document that covers all, or a document for each client, external freelancer and internal document and so forth?
So the first part of that question is, what do you do if you don't have any information? And as I've sort of suggested, you don't want to guess or be too subjective. So you might have to be very, very generic. I mentioned to you that I knew these were printers, but I didn't know any detail about what kind of printers they were. I went to my knowledgeable other half, my husband, and asked him, and you're giving me lots of information here, which I didn't know. So that would be my process. I would find out from the source or from the photographer, whoever gave me the photograph, the department in your case, or, you know, whoever's partnering with the university or the client. I'd get the information from them and I'd use that then to inform the keywording process. The second part of the question, I think, was to do with the different types of clients or users that you might be keywording for. Yeah, you could have internal users that also are very familiar with this terminology, but you can also have internal users within one organization who are not familiar with this at all. So if you spoke to, let's say, the finance team at the university about this image, they might not be familiar with any of these technical terms at all. So in order to help them find it, you would need these umbrella kind of generic keywords like printer, industry, printing, because that's how they will search in a very broad way. But equally, adding these detail keywords that are quite specific will work for the people who work in the School of Graphic Communications, because they're much more familiar with that language. So yeah, I think there was two sort of questions there. But it does, as I say, it depends on how much knowledge you have, and if you don't have the knowledge, you need to find it out. If you can't find it out, don't add anything that is guesswork. And then also target the keywords to help the different types of users, and they can be really experienced, knowledgeable users who understand the terminology, or it needs to be layperson's terms to help people who don't have knowledge and experience of that language.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, hopefully that helps. Okay, well, this was a good one to try. I'm going to ask you to, we're due to stay on for another 20 minutes or so, and obviously I do want to take any other questions about keywording in general, anything we covered last week or anything that we're looking at today. But we probably do have time to do another image if you would like to pick one more.
So maybe we will do the illustration one. So the illustration of a spacecraft.
Yeah, I titled this, and I hope I'm correct. This is my interpretation. So it's a really wonderful image, actually. I love this, and it's very interesting, and there's lots of aspects to explore from a keywording perspective. So, when I was just talking about technical keywords are about the asset itself. So whether it's a photograph or an illustration, or is it black and white, is it color? This is going to have a few technical keywords, I imagine. Do we know what medium it is? It looks like it could be pastel. I'm not sure. But if we have that information, then this is something we'd be adding in the technical keywords category. And with the people, would you describe these as being a certain age range generally? I think the concepts will be really useful to explore on this image as well. So we want keywords for general age range and number of people. That's a really useful one to add as well. And when we've looked at people, we can start looking at what's going on in the scene. So who, we've nearly covered that.
This is like a people in the foreground, maybe in the background.
The people inside the spacecraft, well, are they people? So we'd probably add just the people that we can see, you know, in the foreground, 3 people there. The middle-aged is probably too specific and not particularly helpful, because I always think if you come to a blank search box and you haven't seen this picture, imagine it's not there, and you're looking for pictures of middle-aged people, you're going to get quite an abstract sort of fuzzy illustration of these people. He's got his back to us and she's not that visible. So I wouldn't be that specific. I would just literally stick with adult or child if it's not really the main focus of the image. So yes, there's going to be more keywords about what is happening rather than who is happening or who is doing what within this context. It's interesting how nature's come up kind of before science. I guess you'd think of this as science fiction, really. And science fiction makes me think of technology or the future. We've got futuristic here. But I think I know what you're getting at with the nature. I think what I took from this image, and again, I don't know the background or the context, but it's almost like they're on the other planet, because these people look very much like 1950s human beings as we know them, in what seems to be a massively oversized plant, or you know, some kind of garden that's got these oversized plants. So it's almost like they've been teleported into this planet. You know, they're coming in, maybe they're tourists coming onto this planet, and this is a spaceship that brings them here. But yeah, I mean, without getting too interpretive or subjective about it, I'd probably say that this is definitely science fiction. I'm going to add that one in so we don't forget, because it's really important. And I was thinking about the Victorian image or the vintage image we had from the negative, the glass plate. Is there a style period that you can think of for this picture? I'm kind of thinking like 1950s, like B-movie sort of, you know, the kind of War of the Worlds style to it. Oh yeah, that's good. So I'm going to put that here, 1950s. The silos. I wasn't sure what these are. And maybe that's what you mean by silos, but I'm not really sure even now what they are. Again, they look a bit like sea creatures or some kind of, you know, animal that lives in the ocean. Not entirely sure. Yeah, they're like space tourists, I think, traveling, visiting. So we could have visitor. And what are the concepts that you might think of, like for what you would, if you were going to another planet, what would that be about? Discovery, exploration, adventure. So we're thinking about who's in the picture, what are they doing? So what's their role? Like space tourists visiting another planet. Where are they? We think they're in some kind of alien setting with these oversized plants. What does that mean? So we've got some concepts here around what that could mean conceptually, because as we know, people might search for spacecraft or people traveling to another planet, or they're going to search for things like futuristic environment or discovery, exploration and adventure. So we're trying to cover all the different bases. Invasion, that's a good one. I like that. Travel. I think as well with an image like this, I'd be doing a little bit of research around that style. It is retro, definitely. Retro, kind of retro and vintage can mean similar things. We tend to use vintage for the original thing that's in a contemporary context. So I might have a vintage sideboard from the 1950s in my house, which is more contemporary. So it's a vintage object in the here and now, whereas retro is actually kind of styled to look like it was at that given time, at that particular time in the 1950s. We got that one. So I'm just having another think about conceptual settings. I think we've got these plants. Did we have plants? So maybe something around the jungle aspect, or the kind of overgrown. That's a nice keyword that we use for things like this. Overgrown plants. So what is the spaceship actually doing? I guess it's either taking off or landing. It's arriving or leaving. It would be fine to actually add all of those, even though we don't know what the artist had in mind when they painted it. But we could say that if you wanted pictures of a spacecraft landing or a spacecraft arriving, that this would be a good result. So it would be okay to add those both as keywords. I wonder if people are finding this more tricky because we don't really know the story here, or whether people find it easy because there's quite a lot to see. So there's quite a few keywords that you can add just from looking at the picture. It'd be interesting to know what people's thoughts are on that.
I think it's a combination of both. It's a little bit tricky because of the background, the science fiction background. And then you have the nature thing in the tourist.
Yeah. Space tourism, did we add that? That's a keyword that we're using now for actual space tourism, you know, for people going into space. True. On a, you know, and what is in effect an aeroplane with a, you know, an engine that gets you through the atmosphere. So this is here now. This is the current world that we live in, where space tourism, space tourists are a thing of the present. So you can see, looking at the keywords, that when keywording, it's important not just to think about what we can see and adding all the keywords for things we can see. We're trying to think about the user and second guess how they might search. Everything from very specific things like UFO to what does that mean? And this goes back to session 1 where we were thinking about, you know, conceptually what that means to see a spacecraft in an image, or, you know, a photograph or an illustration. So these are really important concept keywords to add. Okay, I'm just going to come back to the mural boards. Just have a quick look to see if there's another one that you would like to do, Reem, or whether you would like to go back to the slideshow and look at anything else on there, or go over any other questions that people might have.
I need to be a little bit mindful of the time that we have left. So if you have any question, you can again post it on the Q&A. I do have questions actually from my side. I do believe that the same exercise is going to be also repeated if we are using video or audio assets. So the focus today was on images. But my understanding is that the same process is also going to be repeated on different type of files, like a video or audio document, or even the document.
Yes, so that technical field that we were looking at on the mural board exercise would be where we define the asset type. So we've looked a lot at photographs, but also some illustrations as well. So you would use the same process. you would use video as your asset type. And then possibly in your metadata, you might have more specific keywords for video, like it could be an MP4 file, or it could be a raw video, B-roll video, any of these types of things. And then the keywording process for the video would be the same. I do keyword quite a lot of video for one of my clients, and I have to describe everything that happens in that sequence. So from, you know, when the frame opens to when it closes, usually on average about 30 seconds of footage. I'll need to keyword anything prominent in that footage in the same way I would keyword what's in a still image. But I also add specific keywords about the video as well. So those technical keywords can include things like any camera angles, whether it's kind of shot from, shot from above and it's a drone shot, or whether it's a dolly shot moving along, if it's tracking the subject or if it's panning, anything like that to do with the technical camera positioning is added as a keyword, as well as the clip length. And the reason for that is because a lot of pitch buyers or people buying footage want to know how long the clip is, because they might be using it in, you know, documentary film or an advert or something like that. So things like clip length, camera angle, camera movement, and the actual video file type itself would all be quite good keywords to add.
Perfect. So we have also a comment that this is so great. And can you recommend any things to read later about managing keywording, or a website or anything else?
There's loads of resources on this. My approach is to kind of try and know what you're keywording for, because otherwise you might look at a resource that's not particularly relevant to what your project is. There's lots of schemas to help build keywording lists. You know, we've talked about creating your vocabulary and the structure for your terminology. There are lots of schemas available in the public domain, which you'll probably be aware of because many of you are digital asset management students. So you can find those online fairly easily. If building a vocabulary is something you're trying to do. In terms of process, as I've said, it so often depends on context, and that context can be the collection itself, the users of that collection, how they search, what their level of knowledge is. So it's actually very hard to have kind of one definitive resource to go to that tells you how to keyword. That's why I've broken this down into different sections and kind of encouraged you to think about the context every step of the way. I think the process is pretty much always the same. Look at the content. What's the type of content? What's it showing? Who's accessing it? How are they accessing it? What platform are they accessing it on? Each time you ask yourself that question, you'll kind of find your answers as you go. And another good tip as well is to check with your users as you're creating the keywording to make sure that it's working for them. And a good way of doing that is by looking at the search logs. So if you're able to look at the back-end report on what people have searched for, it might say they're getting 0 hits for things you have, and that indicates that you haven't got that keyword in the thesaurus, or it's not being applied, or perhaps someone's spelling Mississippi incorrectly, and we have got pictures of Mississippi, we've just not spelt it correctly in the keywording records. So yeah, building it up based on the context, who's using the content, and then checking in with them that it's working as they would expect it to.
That's really great. So I got one last question. When do you know it's enough? Like, we have been doing a lot of, or adding a lot of keywording. When do you think would be enough number of keywording to be added to an asset in general?
So I think as a rule of thumb, you'd probably say that around 15 to 20 keywords is about right. But again, this changes so much depending on the platform. So you might be keywording for a stock photo library and you get better search page results or better ranking on their search engine if you add 50 keywords. The problem with that is a lot of photographers do add 50 keywords and they're not always relevant, and that's actually worse than adding 10 keywords that are really relevant. So in most commercial organizations, such as, in the creative industries, there's not necessarily a limit on the number of keywords, but there's often a minimum because they want people to tag with something. They want it to be, you know, found somehow. So again, it depends on what they have in place, whether they make you add keywords or not, whether it's, you know, a constrained field, whether it's a required field. But I find, because I work for lots of different types of clients and different businesses, it kind of tends to fall between around 15 and 20 keywords or thereabouts.
Perfect. Well, that was really wonderful. The workshop was really great, and I just want to say thank you so much for your time with us. And yeah, we have a question: who can reach out to you for a possible consultation? So you have the contact information of a Clemency displayed on the slide. We are also asking you for feedback as well on this workshop. Clemency, thank you so much for giving us this really valuable lesson. I personally learned a lot from you. Really appreciate it.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for having me, Reem, and for everybody attending. I've really enjoyed spending my time with you. But if anyone's got outstanding questions or they want to look further into any of the aspects covered in the course, then feel free to drop me an email, or you can also find some examples of keywording on my Make Search Better Twitter account, and also my website has more information about the projects I work on if you're interested.
Thank you everybody, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.